Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything right here on SIFTD Games at SIFTD.net. We are finally past Summer Game Fest / not E3 2025, which means everything's kind of settling back into the groove. We're getting back on our normal schedule, which means that you also need to get back on the normal schedule of asking me questions for this show. Go to SIFTD.net. There's a link in the header there. Click it. Go to our forums, ask me a question. This show doesn't happen if we don't have any, and right now, after this episode, we have none. So please head on over there and ask a question. This show happens because a lot of people are sponsoring us at the Ask Shane tier at patreon.com/sifted. That's $7 per month. That's why this show keeps happening. Thank you to everybody who is pledging at that tier. You guys are rock stars. However, even if you just pledge at our $4 tier, you get to watch this show day one. You also get to ask questions, but we do give priority to people who are pledging at that higher tier. I think everybody can understand that. Hope you guys enjoyed Summer Game Fest and not E3 2025 and our coverage. Let's get on to this week's edition. Okay, our first question in this week's edition comes from first-time question asker, Lazy B. In past Ask Shane episodes, you question whether Xbox will release another console. I agree with some of your arguments, but I think the reliance on console-based Game Pass subscriptions is a major hurdle. A majority of users are likely on console plans, and it's not as simple as just telling them to switch to PC. How would Xbox manage that transition if it ever decided to leave the console market? Well, Lazy B, I like your username. This was all kind of thrown into chaos over the last day or so when Xbox officially announced its next console and basically shared that it's going to be a PC. I mean, that you can watch that whole 5-minute thing, but they could have just summed it all up in like 30 seconds and said the next Xbox is going to be a PC. That doesn't really look like a PC because that is what it's going to be. So your question about switching from Xbox and getting people to go over to PC, I think Microsoft is solving that problem on its own. It's figured this out. Don't forget, it did the same thing with its Rogue Xbox Ally handheld that's coming in the fall. It basically said the same thing. It's a Windows machine. It's going to work with every storefront. It's basically like you just have a little handheld PC in your hands. The same thing is going to happen with the next Xbox. So that's the first thing. Microsoft is kind of solving that conundrum on its own with the way it's designing its hardware going forward. But to the rest of your question, I don't know if it really has to. Because here's the thing. Nobody bought the Xbox Series X. I mean, they haven't released public numbers, but Michael Pachter has told me that he believes they've probably sold around 18 or 20 million Xbox Series X consoles. So there's 30-some million people subscribing to Game Pass, which means probably more than half of those people are still either on an Xbox One, which is Microsoft's old console, or they're on PC. So again, that problem's kind of solved. Like, I don't think people are reliant upon Xbox consoles to access Game Pass. And in fact, that is Microsoft's entire strategy going forward, is to get Game Pass onto every device possible. Remember the trailer, this is an Xbox, everything's an Xbox? I mean, that's Microsoft's goal, is to make you not think that you need an Xbox console to play Game Pass. Now, I'm not going to regurgitate what Pachter has said a bunch of times about needing a GPU and a CPU and storage and all that kind of stuff to make it happen. Could they make a cheaper version of Xbox Series S? I mean, I think that's probably what the handheld's going to be, or more expensive ultimately when it comes down to it, trying to get it down to that smaller form factor. So I think probably Xbox's strategy is, we're going to release this crazy console for the 10% of people left in our fan base that want something like that. But you could keep buying this Xbox Series S, which hopefully goes down in price eventually, or this old Xbox Series X, which, let's be honest, for most people, it's plenty powerful enough. Like, the next Xbox, they say is going to be more powerful, but I think it's going to be really hard for people to tell the difference. I think the same thing's going to happen with PlayStation 6 and PlayStation 5 Pro. People are going to struggle to see the difference. We just learned this week that finally, after 5 years on the market, more people are using a PlayStation 5 than a PlayStation 4. It took 5 years for that to happen. So I think applying prior logic and reason and how things worked in the past to what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future, I don't think it works anymore. Because things are evolving so quickly. There's the move away from physical games. Next consoles probably won't have disk drives, even though I found it very funny that when PlayStation announced that you would be able to sell your used games and buy physical games for PlayStation 4, the audience went crazy. The applause lasted for like 3 minutes. And like 6 years, 7 years later, nobody cares at all. So that shows you how quickly things are changing, how quickly the mind of the player and the consumer is changing. So I don't think you can fall back on old ideals and how things worked in the past to determine how things are going to happen in the future. Okay, next up we have a question from Zet Saber. What are your favorite video game TV ads? Mine are the Metal Gear Solid ones, where the soldier does simple tasks and later finds out it is a suicide mission, and the Crash Bandicoot mascot guy yelling at the Nintendo building trying to pick a fight with Mario. I could have said all the Kevin Butler PS3 ads, but that would have been too easy. Well, to be fair, Zet Saber, you did kind of steal my thunder there, because I do think that Kevin Butler campaign was probably the best campaign for video games ever. And that meaning that it kept going, and there was like a new commercial every month, every 2 months, and he'd show back up if a new game was coming out. He became this guy that everybody sort of loved and trusted, and I think that's really effective in marketing and advertising. So I think those were great. And again, I wish we had more of that. I wish we had more like reoccurring characters in video game trailers. Now, the trailers that you mentioned specifically were like one-offs, and they were great. Like, look, Crash Bandicoot calling out Mario at Nintendo headquarters, that is timeless. I think a lot of people would say Sega does what Nintendo don't is probably another one that people really resonate with. But I think just in general, what I miss the most are the print ads that you used to get in EGM and OPM and all these gaming magazines. That's a medium that is gone. Print ads are kind of a lost art at this point, particularly for the games industry. Now, I'm guessing I haven't seen an issue of Game Informer in forever, and I know now that Game Informer has come back, they are going to publish a magazine again. So I haven't seen an issue of Game Informer in a long time to see if gaming companies are still doing good print ads. But man, back in the day, the print ads in the gaming magazines were amazing. And people would go back and forth at each other. There would be ongoing narrative threads, like an ad that would say one thing one month, and then it continue in the next month, and continue in the third month. All that stuff is pretty much gone now, but I thought that stuff was really clever. And I think going back to and looking at some of these ads, the most interesting ones are the ones for the bad games, where like you remember getting the magazine and then maybe they wrote up a blurb about it in the magazine, but then you see the ad and you're like, ooh, that looks cool. And then the game comes out and is abysmal. Yeah, I think overall some of the best ads come for some of the worst games, which makes sense because you really have to work to sell really bad games and convince people that they're not terrible. So I think those are some of the best ones. I think print ads are the ones I remember the best. I would also argue that now video game commercials are terrible. There's nothing memorable about any of them. They used to have fun and just like have little skits and things in them. Like, that stuff doesn't happen anymore. Now it's just like a 30-second ad that shows a bunch of gameplay, and there's a little disclaimer on the bottom that says, this is actually not gameplay, this is CGI, and that's it. So I do feel like the video game advertisement has definitely lost a little bit of spunk over the last couple decades. Okay, our next question comes from pretty much a weekly contributor, and of course, that is Kevin. With not E3/Summer Game Fest 2025 being over, I'm wondering what your game of the show was. What was the biggest surprise? And to bring the high-low segment from Game Face back, what game went up in terms of hype and what went down? Kevin, I can tell you're an OG bringing back that old Game Face segment that we haven't done for a really, really long time. Maybe we should bring that back when things get a little slow here at the end of summer. We'll see how that goes. Game of the show. Now, I'll just say this. I usually pick game of the show. It has to be a game that was playable. And that's the way we always did it at Game Trailers and G4 and GameSpot before that. It had to be something that's playable, or if the line got a little fuzzy, as long as they played it in front of you and then would hand you the controller and prove to you that it was real and you could actually move in the space. Based upon that, the Unreal Engine 5 demo for The Witcher 4 would have qualified for Best of E3. So maybe that rule isn't the best one to follow. I'm going to follow it anyway. Another thing that's important to me is how much of the game is shown. Is it just this little dinky, like, 5-minute demo that you can run through? Or do they show you, like, the game? Like, do they put the game in front of the press and let the press play it for X amount of time, but you know the whole game's there and you could keep going if you wanted to? That stuff matters too. So, my game, the game for me, of not E3 2025 or Summer Game Fest is The Outer Worlds 2. So I could also have included this in one of your other categories, which was a riser, as far as a game that came into this last month with a certain level of hype, and after it was over, it went up a lot higher. That, for me, was The Outer Worlds 2. You may remember on Game Face that some of the early trailers for that game were scaring me. Like, they were not showing like real gameplay, and the in-engine stuff that they were showing was looking rough. And, well, that ended up not being the case, because they showed a ton of that game at Not E3 2025. It had its own direct presentation. It is Xbox's first $80 game. I don't know if it's going to hold up to that standard eventually, but I'll just say this. Everything that they showed me about that game impressed me and made me more excited for it as well. I think also the writing has proven to be even better, at least so far, even better than the first game. And I think good way to generalize it is that all the shortcomings that I decided the first game had, it feels like they've all been fixed in the second one, and I really like the first one. Also, it looks like this one is a lot longer. The biggest complaint with the first one was that it was short. I think The Outer Worlds 2 is tracking to be a Game of the Year contender / candidate. Okay, now let's talk about the biggest surprise. I have 2 picks for this. So my first surprise was that Grand Theft Auto 6 was not there. This is the last Not E3 before the game comes out. And say what you want, it's definitely not as big a deal as it used to be, like having a big presence at Not E3 or E3. It's not like it was where you'd have this huge in-person press conference and your game would be the last game shown and it would bring the house down and the applause would just thunder through the halls. Like, that doesn't happen anymore, so stuff like that has lost its impact. But still, I mean, if Rockstar wanted, it could have done whatever it wanted. It could have been first in Xbox, last in Xbox, first in PlayStation, last in PlayStation, first in Jeff shows, last in Jeff show. Pachter actually suggested that Jeff should have paid Rockstar to get the next trailer for GTA 6 into Summer Game Fest. And I think that probably would have been really smart, provided he was allowed to promote it beforehand. Then it would have been worth the money, because you'd got more eyeballs on the show. So I think that was a surprise, that there was no presence whatsoever for Grand Theft Auto 6, which is undoubtedly the biggest game in the industry right now. So that was a surprise. And then I think Resident Evil 9 Requiem was a surprise because of how cleverly Jeff set it up in his presentation, where he had Capcom come on there, say the game isn't ready to show yet. We'll finally show it to you guys in the very near future. So everyone's thinking like, okay, maybe they're going to do like a direct type thing, like right after Summer Game Fest or whatever. And then like 10 minutes later, it was in the show. So I think there was a surprise that Jeff got it, because I figured that would be, again, much like GTA 6. Capcom could have chosen where it wanted that trailer to run in any of the Not E3 presentations. The fact that Jeff got it and Capcom gave it to him was a surprise. Setting it up with the juke, basically, saying we're not going to show it, and then showing it 10 minutes later, and then finally showing the game. Now, I will say this. What they showed of the game was a little... I don't think the debut trailer was great. I'll put it to you that way. It does introduce what appears to be the main protagonist and a vague setup of the plot, and some very quick gameplay snippets at the end of the trailer there. Rumors are that the game is open world, and it is interesting that they put out, half of the screenshots they put out showed the world. They didn't show like characters or monsters. They showed places out in Raccoon City. And then they have the big shot that shows the big divot from the end of RE3. So maybe they're hinting that it's open world, but what they showed of the game so far does not lead me to believe that that is going to be the case. So surprised is the best way to put the debut of Resident Evil 9 Requiem, but definitely not my game of the show. Again, it wasn't playable either, which is a little caveat that I like to adhere to. Okay, now let's talk about risers and fallers, and let's do the good stuff first. Let's talk about the risers. I already said I thought Outer Worlds 2 could belong in this category, but I gave it game of the show, so I don't want to include it in this. Probably my biggest riser of any game, though, was Clockwork Revolution. It is a PC Xbox exclusive for now. My guess is by the time it comes out, it'll be announced as a PlayStation 5 game as well, and maybe even Switch 2. It is like a time-jumping Bioshock-like, and like this game caught my attention from the beginning because it has a very cool kind of steampunk, robotic look to it, and that's kind of all we really saw in the first trailer. Now this second trailer shows you what's up with the plot, what it's about, how basic gameplay works, how the time manipulation stuff works. I think this game looks awesome. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out before the next Bioshock. So Clockwork Revolution, the biggest riser for me. Another big riser, I guess I would pick Stranger Than Heaven. This game was called Project Century before, Not E3 2025. It's coming from the same team that makes the Yakuza games at Sega. When it was shown before as Project Century, what they showed was set in like the early 1900s, and then the second trailer is set in the mid 1900s. So it appears that it's some kind of a time jumping thing. The little snippets of gameplay that they've shown, the melee stuff, looks just absolutely brutal. The graphics also look amazing and different from anything that studio has done. So Project Century, hardly on my radar before not E3 2025. I didn't even think that they would show it, honestly. Not only did they show it, they really showed it and made a big impact on me. So that's my other pick for a big riser. As far as games that fell, both of the ones that come to mind are from the same publisher. So the first is Borderlands 4. Going into not E3, there was this big argument about whether it was going to cost $80 or $70, and it kind of persisted all the way through the show. And then as soon as the show ends, it comes out that no, in fact, it's going to be a $70 game and not $80. But the problem was, like, the game just wasn't shown at not E3. Like, during that show, we should be getting, like, tons of gameplay, developer walkthroughs, all this stuff. I mean, this game's coming out soon. And we got, like, nothing. They let the press play it there, but then embargoed their impressions until, like, yesterday. And at that point, like, look, if you run a gaming website, you know how traffic works. You get a big spike at E3, and then everybody disappears for, like, a month. Because they're like, well, that's it. Like, what else could possibly happen? And so traffic dies. So it's really dumb for them to embargo stuff for after the show when everybody's kind of went, shoo, I need a break. I just checked out like 500 video games in like 5 days. So I think it was really stupid. And so I think Borderlands 4 dropped for me. And then the other one is Mafia: The Old Country. It's really weird when you hear about games getting canceled left and right. Or, look, Take-Two is also working on BioShock, and that's been in development for 5 years. We still haven't seen a teaser trailer for that. But here we go. We're getting the green light for Mafia: The Old Country. The last Mafia was not a good game, did not sell very well. The team that makes those games is pretty talented, and I feel like it could do great things if it worked on another IP. It just doesn't. They keep working on Mafia, and I feel like that franchise is kind of dead. And nothing that was shown during not E3 changed that, and that game is also coming out very soon. So that's another game that fell for me, though I have to admit, I didn't have big-time impressions or hopes for it before the show started. Okay, our last question, and this is a long episode. I'm really running on with these answers. This next question comes, and last question comes from Shadowist. With the power of Switch 2, the potential for the next mainline entry in the Zelda franchise is huge. All I want is an epic traditional Zelda with proper dungeons. Is that too much to ask? What would you bring forward from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and what would you leave behind? Well, Shadowist, I hate to break it to you, brother, but this is not happening. I don't think we'll ever get a traditional Zelda again, meaning like a more linear Zelda that kind of holds your hand and walks you through the game with legitimate dungeons where you go into the dungeon, you play all the way through it, you get a new upgrade at the end of the dungeon, and then that new upgrade is the thing that you use for most of the next dungeon, rinse and repeat. I don't think we're ever going to get that again from Zelda. And the reason why is because Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, sales-wise, have destroyed any prior Zelda game. I mean, they have sold double, triple, Breath of the Wild may have sold quadruple what the next closest Zelda game was in sales. So it would be stupid for Nintendo to do anything else but make a sequel to Tears of the Kingdom. It's kind of the same ideology of why Nintendo wasn't innovative with Switch 2 hardware. It's like, it would be idiotic to bail on this concept. It's a license to print money. Like, why would you throw it all away just trying to uphold your reputation for being an innovator in hardware? It doesn't make any sense. Rolling Zelda back to the old school Zelda doesn't make sense, even though I am with you, Shadowist. I would much rather play a traditional Zelda game with real dungeons and that same gameplay loop where get a new item, use it ad nauseum in the next dungeon, rinse and repeat, fight a boss. I wish it would come back with better storytelling. I'd like to hear some voice acting in this franchise at this point. It feels like they've been nudging up to it for a long time. That we get like weird flappy jaw stuff from Link, where he's not actually talking. I don't know what it is with this franchise, why Nintendo won't have someone actually write a good script and do some real voice work for it. It is getting better, so they're inching that way. I hope that's something that they will continue. Other stuff from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom I think they should bring over. Like, I think they should bring over the building stuff. I think they should make it maybe a little bit more optional than it is now, not as required as it is now. I enjoy parts of it. it starts to get a little bit annoying at certain points in the game. When you get further into the game, you have to build more elaborate contraptions. That's where I kind of fall off. But I think that's an important part of Zelda now, and I think if Nintendo didn't include that, I think the younger fans would freak out and the game would do horribly sales-wise. So I think you need to bring that over. However, like, chop down the size of the open world. Even with Switch 2, I struggle to think that they're going to be able to fill the open world with enough stuff to rationalize how big the open world is in these Zelda games. It is just this vast expanse of nothing. And as far as cutting other stuff, cut the stamina. The climbing stuff is so stupid. Having to climb these huge cliff faces while you have this little meter that dwindles down. It's just dumb. And then the rain comes, you get washed off the rock. No, I don't want any of that. I generally like the open world concept for Zelda. Like, look, even Ocarina of Time had like a very primitive open world. It had big fields that you could ride through. So I'm not averse to having big, expansive, gigantic worlds for a Zelda game. There just needs to be stuff to do in them so you're not just running around aimlessly through miles and miles of empty terrain. So I think do a better job with the open world, make it something more worthwhile. I think that would be probably a good shift for the franchise, regardless of if you like the old style or the new style. But the truth is, Shadow, is like, I just don't think it's ever coming back. It's sad. I think the best hope that we have at this point is that Nintendo remakes the old Zelda games and like puts a lot of work into them, and so it's not just a remaster but truly a remake where they bring in some of the newer elements from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom into these older games while still keeping the structure the way it was when they were originally released. I think that is sadly our best chance. Okay, that's it for this long edition of Ask Shane Anything. Gonna take a while to edit this one and get it to you guys before the day is over today. Thanks to everybody who is pledging anything at patreon.com/sifted. Even some of y'all, you're just like, look, man, here's $1 a month. That's all I can afford. It helps. It makes a difference. Head on over there and help us out if you can. If you go over there and you really like this show, maybe consider pledging at the $7 a month tier, that Ask Shane tier. That ensures that this show keeps happening. But I appreciate everybody who does anything to help us. Hope you guys have a great week. I'll see you next time.